This is Laborc, and it is so nice to have you here. These are the paints you need. If you watched my previous videos, then you saw that Papa Laborc usually just paint the bases black and leaves them as it is. While simple black bases got some elegant feel to them, that's usually not how you finish a mini. I show you how to paint a pair of bases that fits almost every dungeon crawler game and especially looks great with the game tiles of Massive Darkness 2. Are you having a bad time getting the minis out of their boxes? I mean, these plastic trays are good for transporting, but getting the minis out of the tray and back is just a hassle. Thanks to Fancy But Functional, Papa Laborc received a nice MDF organizer which has a lot of little trays for the tokens and cards of the game, which fits nice and tidy in the core box. Look, the card holder is even magnetized. So cool. Okay, Papa Laborc, but if you fill your core box with little MDF trays, where do you put the minis? In plastic bags? No. You put them in the heroes and mobs and the roaming monsters boxes, which you can have nicely padded so your minis are protected, and you can also have these in different colors. So check out Fancy But Functional on Etsy if you want one of these. You can find the links in the video description. Okay, I'm gonna make two versions of these. Both of them start with sketching out these stone tiles with a pencil. I looked at the tiles from the game and basically copied a section of them so they will blend in nicely, but I encourage you to sketch out any random pattern, it will look nice. By the way, these are just some cheap acrylic bases I picked up in my local game store, but they have the same 25mm size that most of the minis have in the core box. I didn't cut any of the minis from their base, and I highly advise that you wouldn't do that either, because it's a bit tricky to glue them back. When you sketched out your tiles, we fill in the stone part of them with Stegadon scale green, which is actually blue. You can use some dark grey too, but having some color in these stones is more interesting in my opinion. Use base layer consistency and try to be precise. It's not a big deal if you get messy a bit, because we will do some tidy up work after this section. And I usually went back between the steps to make the edges of those tiles crispy. It's a very good introduction to freehand painting, because it's easy and you will be satisfied with the results if you try it for yourself. So let's blackline between the cracks with a base layer consistency of any black paint you have. Shape your brush to have a nice tip and keep your hands steady so your lines will be straight. Now we start introducing the color of our light source for the OSL effect. For the right side, I mixed some Wild Rider red to the Stegadon scale green, and on the left I did the same but with Talon sand. I only applied this layer from half of the base, or more like 3/4 of the surface. I use base layer consistency and some stippling that will help me blend the color and to create some nice textures at the same time. Then I glazed over the layer to make the transition of the gradient smooth as possible. Dilute your paint with a bit of water or glaze medium and apply a couple of layers. This layer will blend in easily because the value difference between the colors is not so big, so you only need like 4 to 5 layers of glazing. Same brush motion every time and wait for your layers to dry completely before applying the next one. Or I slap on your tiny hand. Okay, let's introduce our midtone for the OSL effect. These colors will be Wild Rider red and Talon sand. Apply it by gradually decreasing the highlight areas, and you can edge highlight some of the edges that are facing toward our light source with these colors. Technically, there are no edges but the end of the tiles we painted. I use thin layers to slowly build up the opacity of the colors, and it will help us with blending them too. After that, we glaze some the same way we did before. Now it will be a little more challenging to blend these colors, because they differ a lot from each other, so you need more layers, but don't worry, it's not a big deal. And as you can see, my layers are drying super fast, thanks to the freaking 40 Celsius degree temperature we have in Europe. I hate summer. Moving on to the next highlight, we add some sunny skin tone to our Midtone color and continue the process reducing the highlight areas even more. You see, I'm still using stippling as I apply this layer because it makes blending so much easier. If you never heard of stippling before, you basically apply the paint with small dots or lines like scratches to create texture this way. It's quite useful and easy technique. Your brushes won't like it because it would reduce the lifetime of the tip quite a lot, but if you have any old brushes with a split tip, that's perfect for stippling. Then we glaze over this layer as well, but you are going to notice that this time you only need a couple of layers to blend the colors, because this new color was close to the previous one we used before in value. Lastly, I do some edge highlights on the ties where the light is coming from. You can edge highlight around the sides too, and this is very important to only highlight from one direction with this color. Otherwise the OSL effect wouldn't make any sense. Use base layer consistency and a brush with a nice tip so you can do some precise work. Now for the other side of the ties we use Thunderhawk blue, which will work as an edge highlight too for the darker parts. This will increase the definition tremendously and have a nice finish. And that's it guys, simple yet cool looking stone tile bases that you can use for any game. They took like 10-15 minutes, but when you are painting one with a miniature on it, it would be way faster because you have less surface to paint. Thanks for joining me on this little painting adventure. A huge thanks to my Patreons who support these kind of videos, with a special shout out to Jonathan Rhodes, Dominic Reitman, trying to paint Meres, Jonathan Mausner, and Ruzak. If you want to support Papa Laborc's work, you can do that on Patreon. You will have early access to these videos and you can vote on the next mini. I hope the rest of your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt.